Beautiful. Okay. Looks like we're all set. Mhm. Okay, we're going to start. It is 4:30. Uh, Hopefully everybody, we got the Zoom links out in time this time, and should have enabled everybody who wants to be here for the live portion of this to be here. And yeah, well, this is it. This is the final segment of a 3-day process, a 3-day journey that took me 9 months to put together and is the culmination of 15 years of professional experience and 25 years of my life. So this this summit, even though it doesn't feel like it to me right now, I'm sure at some point I will look back and realize that this is the product of a lot of investment and you know uh, a big I consider myself extremely fortunate to have made it through the emerging stage of masculinity and to come through my years of 16, 18 up until 30, because it was a very difficult time. And I consider myself lucky and blessed to have made it to where I made it. And then even more fortunate to, right after I started to experience some joy and some freedom and some hope and success in my life as a man, to then be put right back into the position of guiding other men along this journey. And that has been crucial. I when I was in my late 20s, I was contemplating my career choice. And there were two ideas that I had. One was to be a psychologist. I knew that I loved to help people and think through things. And that seemed like a good career path. And the other was law. I wanted to be a lawyer because I love to argue and I love to win and compete. And I scheduled a meeting with a family friend who was a psychologist, and I scheduled a meeting with a family friend who was a lawyer. And the psychologist booked a whole hour for me and talked to me and told me about the path and really listened to me. And I was, so full of myself. I was telling him, what I believed about humanity and the way we work. And he listened and said, that's like this theory, that's like that theory. And I walked away feeling really, charged from that meeting. And I owe a thank you to Jacob Steinberg for that. And I booked a session with the family friend for a lawyer who was a lawyer, and he was so busy that he actually blew me off. And I made my decision right there. I said, that quality of life is just not for me. I need I need to be going this way. And thank God, because it forced me to be accountable. And the level of depth that I've invested in this journey of becoming a man, which apparently never ends. I have found no end to it. But it certainly is something that we learn and we become more proficient at. And so this is a huge joy to be here. I do want to say, if you have any questions at all, I'm going to put the chat space up. Please put your questions in there. Like anything that you have, I'm actually going to see if I can just put this on the side. You're here live. I don't know how many people are going to join. We did have an issue shifting to webinar, and a lot of people were confused because the webinar link was sent out, you know, in advance, and now this is a last minute thing. So I guess I'll just start by inviting any questions. People who have tuned in, if you want to write a question in the chat space, I'm going to take some time right now and answer some of those questions. So let's take a minute and, tune in. And even if you have any questions about how I work with young men, the process of becoming a man, helping men become men, you know, that I would love to see any questions. So I'm gonna create some space right now for that, and then we'll hop in again. Mm. Can you talk more about how to define what a man is? Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so when I started working with young men, um, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Like I said, I was encountering these beings that were really, really struggling, and it was life and death. And I was fortunate. I got compensated and I had the resources to spend a lot of time with these young men, and their parents loved them. And I worked hours upon hours with these beings, right? Because I say, like, this whole thing is about a phenomenon. It's the phenomenon of life, the phenomenon of addiction, the phenomenon of masculinity. And when you look at it like that, or when I looked at it like that, it really opened to the mystery of it all. And after, through intuition and just acting on my intuition, and I don't want to say impulsivity, but I just was survival instinct. We had put together a method and a process that really worked. And at the end of that, I could look back and say, what is a man? And what I did is I promised to the parents and to the young men, what a man is you are going to be, you're going to go from dependent to independent. You will be independent. You will independently be able to create, instead of receive as a dependent. You will be able to create a life that you find joy in and that you are responsible for. So that's my definition of a man: someone who is capable of independently creating a life that they find joy, meaning in, and that they are responsible for. It has not been handed to them. That's what happens when we are little boys. The life is handed to us. That's my definition. If you watch the talk with Michael Gurian, the interview, he defines what a man is similarly. He says a man is a wise, successful, and loving human being. So those are his pillars and his benchmarks that he strives for. You know, at the end of the day, we're just using words to try to come up with some idea that we can paint. But for me, the key is independence and happiness. That those are the keys. And when you're in that stuck stage, you're definitely dependent. You're not happy. You just don't have the power to create a life that you enjoy. So that's how I define what a man is. I hope that great question, because that actually is the foundation of everything that I do. Um, you, is there any more questions? Please put them in. I'm going to keep talking a little bit about this, but defining a man in those simple terms created a process and a goal that was more realistic and digestible for me and for the young men that I was working with. Because the biggest problem that I find people face in working with young men is that they overshoot the mark of what they're capable of, and then they end up giving up and grossly undershooting the mark. So most of the people that work with young men are doing what I call maintenance work. They are keeping them alive, keeping them out of hospitals, keeping them out of jail, but there's no real hope. So for me, to move from maintenance to transformation, where you really are engaged in a change process, though I strive for those simple pillars of masculinity. Great question, David. Thank you. How about another one? You guys have better questions than I do. So, what else do you all have? How about Logan? Logan, you got any? Yeah, or Joseph? Okay. How do you go about provoking action into men who struggle very much with procrastination? Okay, that's a great question too. Um, so I'm going to give two answers to that question, maybe three. The first is, oh, let me start with the basic one. This morning, I gave an example about how I enter and how I recommend that people enter the life of a young man. Okay. Most people who enter the life of a young man do so either as a aggressor, like, you got to get your shit together, you got to do this, why can't you get good? Like all of this, you said provoking, just really trying to be provocative. That never works. And it's easy to understand why that won't work. You cannot aggress a man into change, particularly when he's in a weakened state. If you put too much of that pressure on him, it's going to destroy whatever will he has to create his own life. So extreme aggression, it's not the answer. And that's for sure. But you also can't be so passive that you are basically a non-factor in their life. So the way to provoke action is you have to figure out exactly the level of discomfort, of inspiration, of challenge, and of love that you can introduce to that person. So how do you do that? That's the hard part. That's why I say that the future of therapy is mastery of connection. You have to learn to tune into yourself and figure out what level can you challenge this person? What level can you befriend this person? You're basically offering all your resources to that individual, but you have to titrate what you're doing so that they can tolerate it. So does that make sense? You can put that in the chat space while I go on to the next component. The next component is, when I came into this field, I was mentored. My mentor, Jeremiah Hedgebeth, he was the greatest counselor that I've ever seen, even to this day. And he said that what we are doing with, he said addicts, but I'll translate to young men. We are becoming the itch that they have to scratch. So we're we're there to create some level of agitation. Like you've ever had an itch, you cannot resist. Ah, you just can't resist it. It's an itch or it's a cough. You have to do it. So how how I learned from him how to do that is he was confrontational, very confrontational. However, I did learn that he only confronted people to the level that he had already connected or was able to connect to them. So if he could not establish connection with them, he could not create the itch. He could not challenge them because ultimately, for change, we need to be challenged. That is undeniable, but you have to earn the right to do that. Um, yeah, aggression leads to shame. Passiveness leads to apathy. I like what you said earlier about connection. I struggle with connecting with my nephews, and the few times I've shown up and just been there, they have opened up. With my peers, I tend to be an aggressor. Yeah. Um, I yeah, I work with, you know, can you speak more to the challenging part? Yeah, you mean about challenging them, challenging others? Sure. Um, I have really learned a ton about challenging people. And as I say, I worked for now 15 years in a field that requires me to constantly and deeply challenge people. And what I learned is that I can only challenge people at the level that I myself allow others to challenge me. It opens up this capacity. And Dr. Warren Farrell, who spoke on day one, said that the greatest problem facing our generation is that we interpret criticism in the wrong way. He said that it's hardwired into us to become defensive to criticism, and that creates a stalemate in terms of the change process. So the greatest thing is to just open yourself up to be challenged by others. And the more you do that, and the more I do that, I have the authority to challenge other men because I'm on the same journey as you. There, there's some there's some sense of kinship, and this is a particularly male phenomenon. Dr. Michael Gurian, who has studied at a neurological level masculinity across every culture on this earth ever, males love to challenge each other. It is something unique to our species. We love to challenge each other. He said, you'll find in every single culture, when you leave young males alone, they start challenging each other physically, mentally. They rib each other. They put each other down to bring each other up. So it's something that's very natural that somehow has become very, I don't know, unpleasant. But yeah, so that's what I hope that's helpful. These are great questions. Let me see something here.
Hey, Gregory, it's Logan.
What's up, Logan? How you doing?
Pretty good. So I didn't get to quite catch everything of the emerging men. So I'll have to rewatch some of the stuff. I saw some of the beginnings, but I just had some I guess, general questions. A lot of it,
Yeah.
I guess, with my own dad. He was a dad that was like extremely passive. From what I understand, he um, had an abusive father that was alcoholic to the point where he hated his dad. His grandfather, um, he considered his grandfather more of a dad than his own dad. And when
Mm.
his dad finally passed away, I don't think he ever got like any maybe closure or resolution to like that troubled relationship. And
Mm.
so, as I'm old, I'm still, young man coming into my own manhood, and um like I have all these like questions and things. My dad was really extremely passive, so he made it a point to never show aggression.
Mm.
But from my own experience, if you're not showing that aggression outwardly, then it's directed inwardly, and that was my experience,
Mm.
which led to like self-sabotaging behaviors and stuff. So there still very much was that aggression, that anger, but it was
Mm.
just directed inwardly because I didn't want to show it outwardly. So I so I had all these like questions about like why my dad was so like indifferent, apathetic, and just like so uninvolved. Um,
Mm.
I guess those are some of the kind of lingering things. I still have these. I still kind of like
Yeah.
you know I get the more I think about it, the more questions I have about as to why his like disposition is that way.
Mm-hmm.
Even like trying to rekindle a relationship with him, as I'm older, I pretty
Mm.
much have to do like the onus of the work.
Mm.
And then he's just kind of detached and just like in his own being. So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
from your experience what you've seen with fathers that exhibited that type of behavior, like what.
Yeah. Did your father, what does your father do for work? Or what did he do for
Well,
work?
he's retired. He's retired now. He was primarily like a carpenter, woodworker, and then he
Mm.
switched into like handyman work and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, when that company closed down, so he doesn't work anymore. He's forced into retirement. He has a
Mm-hmm.
medical condition, so he doesn't work anymore. So he's retired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, and I am going somewhere with this, do you mind sharing what his medical condition is?
Oh yeah. So it's a
Okay.
Parkinson's
Yeah.
disease.
I ask that because, and again, I would recommend that you listen to the talk I had with Dr. John Strax, because what happens is, as men especially, we internalize all this psychic and emotional um, uh, energy, and it creates all sorts of diseases, from heart disease to cancer to Parkinson. It's really, it really is incredible. And these are medical doctors that have, you know, um, studied this. So I would listen to that. But the thing is, for most of us, and my father is in this camp too. He never was exposed to any type of personal self development process as a man, like never. And I watched, and I get the same feeling about your father. My father grew up in post World War II Greece, where his family and him were staying in line for 2 miles to get a loaf of bread. And he grew up anemic and he had all sorts of health problems. And, he just wanted to enjoy life and make sure that he didn't go backwards to that type of poverty. And he created a life for me and my family. But there was no exposure to the type of things that I know you've been exposed to, which is like really looking at who we are as men. And if we notice something, Like, wow, I grew up in the home of an alcoholic man. What did that do for me? And how can I heal from that? How can I heal so that I can be fully present to my children, to my son? This was not something that our fathers were able to. I don't know if they're able to. It was very uncommon for men of that era to give themselves permission to ask themselves that stuff and to go along that process, right? And they have the career. He's a carpenter. He's got to work to put food on the table. And it's like, it's not that healing was not available to them, because I know through my own journey, I've met men of all ages who somehow found their way to becoming whole as a man. Men in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. It's there. It just was less common. And, one of the things that we know is that we cut off certain things from our emotional life. So if your father grew up and was experiencing the harmful aspect of rage, he learned that rage and aggression were synonymous, that they were dangerous, that he made a whole narrative about that. And then what happens is we just cut that part of us off. So people cut off parts of their sexuality, they cut off anger, they cut off sadness, right? Like if a kid is sad and he goes home and he's like bummed out because he didn't make the team, and his dad's like, come on, son, you can do it. You can make the team next time. What the kid really learns is it's not okay to be sad. Versus a dad that comes and was like, you're bummed, huh? And give the kid a little chance to see that sadness is an okay feeling, not to indulge in, but to master, right? And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with anger. I use aggression with young men and they love it. They never experience, or I shouldn't say never, they rarely experience it as threatening. And I frequently give them the permission to tell me how they are experiencing me, right? So if they do say like, you're so challenging, you're so aggressive, why don't you give me a break? I listen to it. I say, okay, I'm willing to hear that. I'm willing to hear that. The reason that I feel like I don't want to give you a break is because from my point of view, you have no urgency in your life. We've been working together for 4 months. You're not doing, and you have that type of a dialogue. So it creates that sense of trust. Does that help or resonate?
Yeah, no, it does. Like I said, I guess, like I said, as I'm, kind of on the brink of thinking about having my own family and doing all of that, like, I don't know. I guess I've never really experienced something with like such a level of like apathy and indifference of like not wanting to have the desire to be involved in lives. It's very different from most of the people that I know that I've connected with, had friendships as relationships with, etc. So it's, yeah, I guess it's challenging. So I guess for myself, I mean, a lot of that is manifested into a lot of my own issues with like self-esteem and acceptance and stuff, because my dad also suffered with that pretty extensively. So I think I just kind of modeled that going forward. But I guess really just kind of, I guess suggestions and tips of, I guess who to like model after, not necessarily trying to seek somebody else's approval, but for looking for like, good models, so to speak, on just like fatherhood and just being like involved, I realize I kind of gravitate towards individuals that have that sort of like how they show up in that way. And so a lot of it has really kind of been pulling from a bunch of different people and then like kind of forming that into my own, like, and using that as like how I want to show up to my family. So I've been
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot of personal work so that I show up the way that I would want to my family, compared
Mm-hmm.
to my dad, who didn't really show up at all, honestly. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he did in his own ways, the best ways he knew how, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
in the way of like personal development and self-awareness and all that stuff. It was just different, as maybe harder, but at the same time, a lot of it is also a mindset too, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be open to getting help,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that he never really, I guess, was wanting to do, even if it was offered. So I know that
Mm-hmm.
that definitely plays a huge part in all that. So
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah. I think, how you're going about it is exactly how I went about it, which is you study other men and get enough of a variety, because you're gonna you're gonna find a lot of extremes, because a lot of men that are successful are what I would call one trick ponies. They found something that works and they use it over and over again to achieve some level of mastery. But when you really, really look under the hood, they're actually not as successful as they might immediately seem. So a lot of times I've studied with like a man or observed him, and you learn what you can, and you just have a wide variety of men that you can learn from. And like it's, the adage, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. The more that you're ready, the more you're going to attract men who can teach you. And there's tons of books. I'll throw up the books that have helped me the most, because some of the stuff is just, in my opinion, garbage. It in that's where my work with men has been, because it's life and death. I have not been able to rely on stuff that doesn't work. So I really found what will really work under any and all conditions. So, you know, but it's out there. And the only other thing I'll say is a quote from Robert Bly. And he said, if you haven't been fed, become bread. Like, the most important thing that we can do as men is see what we lack and what we lacked, and give it fully to the world. And when we try to do that, we see like, well, but I can't. I don't have it in me. I have never received it from my father or my upbringing. But my commitment is to give to the world what I feel that I never got. And there's something through that process that seems to work. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. Thank you.
Cool. How about any other questions? These are great. I'll just, while somebody's, um, yeah, being raised by females, single mother teachers, we as males are taught anger, rage is unacceptable. It's frightening. Do you have tips, comments about this? Or which other speaker spoke to this? I haven't had a chance. Yeah, I'm trying to think who was mentioning. I feel the best one for you to start with, John, would be Warren Farrell. It's a little bit lengthier, because we talked for almost 2 hours. But even if you just listen to his voice for like 20 minutes, there's something about his spirit. And he mentions this in the talk. I, and I also said this. I said, Warren, if anybody gets out of line, this was the first live interview. And so I was a little bit concerned. And I said, if anybody gets out of line, don't worry about it. I'll handle it. I have, a decade and a half of experience. And he said, that's okay. He said, anybody that's angry, I always know what's underneath that is just their vulnerability. So I just listen to them. And you got this sense of this 80-year-old man, almost 80 years old, who's devoted his entire life in service of humanity. He's such a beautiful guy. And it's just, you know yeah, don't be afraid of it. And that's the big thing. And when I work with young men, everybody's so afraid of what they're demonstrating, right? And then they try to medicate and suppress and control. And what they're really doing, if they're being honest, is they're treating their own fear and their own anxiety. This behavior that this young man is exhibiting is producing some feeling in you that you don't like. You're scared. What are you scared of? He's going to do what? He's going to hurt you? I mean, do you feel it's okay to medicate him and suppress him and shame him, right? That was, you said shame. That was the favorite technique of the elders, in the school where I grew up. They would just shame the crap out of you. You'd get out of line and 95% of them would make you sit. I remember sitting and facing a wall because I was too energetic or I was too, this is ridiculous crap, right? But this is what they did because they didn't know how to deal with it. And I am not intimidated by, or let me be careful with my word choice. It is perfectly okay for me to feel a sense of these young men's power and anger, and to understand that it's natural for me to feel a moment of what could best be defined as intimidation. I am intimidated by what is coming at me. But then the question is, what do I do with it? Right. And what I think the biggest thing that I've learned so much about this. It's really hard to kind of share it all. I feel a little bit overwhelmed right now just thinking about this whole experience. But I'll share a story. My wife loves my stories, she said. So when I had shared earlier a story about me working with adolescents. I was working a rehab, and the kids would come after school. And we had, I believe it was like 40 or 50 adolescents, and they're packed into this huge room. And they come by these little vans that take them from school to the rehab for 4 hour sessions, 4 times a week. They were coming. And the energy in the room was like bubbling. It was like bursting with energy, and they're so loud, and you couldn't even find yourself. It was, oh my God. And I was the new guy. And I would show up to this group at 4 o'clock. And what I noticed was I would look outside. There was windows all along the room. And I would see at 4 o'clock my supervisor walking out and going to her car. And then she'd come back like 45 minutes later with a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And then the other guy, who was the second in command, he was in his office on phone calls doing work. Well, then the third, another woman who got hired right as I got hired, she saw what the supervisor and the other guy was doing, and she did the same thing. She had work. So in the end, it's just me with 50 you know, 14 to 18-year-old adolescents who don't want to be there, right? They're all, they're like a swarm of bees or hyenas. And I refused to not show up. I would show up on time, 4 o'clock, even 5 minutes early. And I remember the feeling in the pit of my stomach um, when all the young men would come, and I'd be all in my head because, you know, some of them, they would mess with you because they want to see if they can get you off guard. They show all their behaviors, right? Well, I made a commitment. I made a commitment that I was going to take that group over, not with control, but with my strength of purpose. My strength of purpose. I am going to create an environment in this room where we all have a shared mission and we all are about something. I am going to create that. And I did that day after day after day after day. And it finally worked. It doesn't mean that there wasn't the behavior, but they knew who was in charge. And I did that through my strength of purpose. So the most important thing I feel that I've learned in accepting young men as they are is let them come as they are, let them be who they are, and give them your sense of purpose from the heart. I care about you and I care about life. You're here because you have a problem. I don't have a problem. The school has a problem. And then you have to go into that. But then you got them working with you. So sense of purpose, it's the most important thing. Great question. Johnny Brewer. Any other questions? Okay. Um, oh, well, feel free to, you know, put in the chat or just unmute yourself if you have any question. Um, I want to, but I want to paint one final picture to, you know, the people who have attended this summit. We are working with young men, okay? And even when you're going through it as a young man, I want to paint a picture for you. This is a very long, slow, laborious process. I gave the example of the metaphor of the mountain on day one. No, you can't get to that mountain top. There's no chopper that can take you there. You can't microwave the food. It takes what it takes. And persistence and patience are key. But skill is also key. And what I mean by that is what we're really trying to do with you as a young man, you mostly have been domesticated. You've been domesticated. You have been removed from your natural environment and you now live in a zoo. This is the epitome of dependency. And even if you found a way to get your food, like as a wild animal, you're a scavenger, you're stealing it, you know. And if you want to live the life of a scavenger, that's your choice. You know, our neighbor just had his 2 bicycles stolen. If that's what you want to do, you want to steal, you want to sell drugs, you want to, whatever you know, that's your choice. But I'm not here to make scavengers. I'm here to make kings. And if you want to learn to be a king, you, number one, you can't be a scavenger. And number two, you have to understand that you have been habituated into the zoo. Now, again, please understand, I've been working with extreme examples of this. People who are they're not able to feed themselves at all. What does that look like? That means they can't hold a job. Look at most men 18 to 30, they can't hold a job. They cannot hold a job. And they're blaming capitalism and they're blaming America. And this is all this rage and anger that's being stoked by the media and, you know, just for lack of a better word, either evil or stupid politicians. But you can absolutely make it, but you need to learn to survive. This is what's not being offered to young men. They're not being taught how to leave the zoo and return to the jungle. But guess what? Again, like the mountain, you cannot just have somebody come in the zoo, take you out of the zoo in a chopper and drop you off in the Sahara. You're going to die. This is what happens all the time. And whether death means they just don't make it, or they relapse, or they get arrested, or they become scavengers again, they were not taught how to live as a wild animal again. That is a process. There are different set of rules. When you live in the zoo, somebody's going to come and throw you a steak, whether it's your parents giving you money for your apartment or school or whatever they're doing. They're supporting your life. You're still a dependent little boy. You can argue with that, but it's true. You cannot sustain your own life. Or this is just what's happening. You're living the life of a dependent. If you want to learn how to be independent, you have to learn how to hunt. You have to learn how to rewild yourself. And what that means is there are three aspects of rewilding men. Number one, you have to get them reacquainted with the process. You have to get them reacquainted with this mountain. But again, you don't take them and drop them off at, base camp 4. That's ridiculous. They're not going to make it, right? You get them reacquainted with the base of the mountain. You get them reacquainted with the process, the stakes, because the stakes are more unforgiving, right? When it gets cold in the zoo, when it gets cold out at your local zoo, go ahead and see what they do with those lions. They're going to come and lead the lions, right, with their big balls swinging against their legs, lead those lions back into the heated comfort, because those lions cannot take care of themselves. They've been totally habituated to this insular life, right? So you cannot take them to that level. You have to introduce them at the level that they can survive, the level that they can tolerate. And that's a slow process. But I can tell you, like I said, I've taken men who were like lions sitting there half dead, with basically people thinking, well, should we euthanize this one? It doesn't even eat. It doesn't even get off the couch, doesn't do anything. Even they have been reacquainted with the wild, getting jobs, getting married, getting a career. Any lion can be rehabilitated because it has it within itself to be rehabilitated. But you got to get them reacquainted with the process. You also have to get them reacquainted with power, theirs and yours. You cannot help young men if you cannot show them your power. It's impossible. They need to feel your power. They need to feel real everything, all of it. Your love, your hate, your aggression. They need to feel you as a real person, because you can only get into a relationship with a real person. That's why most of these rehab processes and therapies are not working for young men, because it's not real. So you got to become real. And show them your power and teach them how to have access to their power. So the process, the power, and then the most important, maybe, is the purpose. What is the purpose of all this? I get men who are on their deathbed to sign on to a process, to power, because I'm teaching them what the purpose of all of this is. Even if I'm not telling them logically, they are feeling there is a purpose to all this. There's a purpose to this life, because that purpose is what is embedded deep inside every man. And we are the ones that need to bring that purpose into life. If we men are not bringing that purpose into life, it will be what it is right now, a purposeless life, endless chaos, conflict, confusion. What is most needed is a male's sense of purpose and direction. So my commitment and my prayer was to bring this to young men. I don't know if I've succeeded, but I've tried. And I'm going to continue to try. And I'm going to continue to try because when I was in your shoes, I mattered. And I didn't want to die in some zoo or living some shit life. I wanted to have my life back. And for me, that mattered. And so I am trying to bring this to young men because I want to show them that there's more to life than what they're living and to teach them how to attain it. So I want to, I'm going to open it up again, but I do, before I do, I want to humbly and deeply thank all the speakers. I'm not going to name everybody, but I really want to thank you. You have devoted yourselves to this mission just like I have. And you shared your time and your expertise and your experience. And I humbly thank you for that, all of you. I also want to thank anybody that attended, people that signed up, people that purchased it, people that are going to watch it in the future. I thank you for taking time out of your life. And this is my passion. This is what I do. I am a dentist who knows how to fix teeth, except I'm a mentor that knows how to help young men. So this is what I do, and I'm very thankful that people showed up and appreciate all the love and the feedback. The questions are wonderful. I also do want to thank a local sober house, Peace and Purpose, in Asheville, North Carolina. They were incredibly supportive. They brought this experience to their residents and tried to get them to sign up. I don't know how many signed up, but I want to thank Peace and Purpose. Also want to thank a huge supporter of the summit, Dopey Podcast. It is an excellent podcast for talks about drugs, addiction, and other dumb shit, and they just make it fun. And Dave is a great host. He interviewed me for my book, and I highly thank and recommend Dopey Podcast. And I just thank everybody that helped me put the summit together, Jocelyn and Kayla and my whole team. And that's my thank you. I do want to offer some time. We have some time left. If any questions or comments that people want to make, I'm going to open it up. Thank you, Joey. I said this in the book too. The deepest thanks that I have is to the men that have helped me and the young men that have gone on this journey with me. We have overcome everything, anything and everything. I've created lions, and they were willing to go on this journey. So I thank them that they had the courage, and am so happy and proud. It's an amazing feeling to watch them get their lives back, let me tell you. Mm-hmm. Can't wait for the Emerging Man Summit too. Well, go ahead. Yeah. Thank you, John. I love you. Mm-hmm. Okay. While people are, if there's anything final while you're putting it in, I want to invite you. I put together two master classes that start in November. One master class is for young men in their 20s and 30s who want to improve their life. Don't waste yourself thinking like, oh, are the men going to be at this level, at that level? If you are a young man and you want to improve your life, it's a 3-week masterclass. We're going to go deeper into the type of content that yeah, lol, but that's okay. I purchased. Good. I'm glad. And I want to say something to you, Sutharsan. Okay. Um, yeah. So I put together that master class. I put together the master class. I also put together a master class for helpers. So it's a 4-week process. So I'm going to teach young men in their 20s and 30s how to improve their life. And I'm going to teach people how to work with young men. We're going to go deeper into this process. Those both start in November. There's a huge discount if you register within the next 48 hours. Go on my website, brothergregory.com. And if you're interested, you'll read more about what those entail, and I hope people take advantage of them. And if we didn't give enough, this Friday, I'm going to open up 2-hour slots. You will see those emails will be sent to you. Those are free. One is for emerging men. 1 hour is for emerging men this Friday, and 1 hour is for helpers. So look for those, and those are free. Those Friday things are free. The master classes are, I forgot the prices, but go on the website and you'll see those. And yeah, I'm really excited to continue this journey with people. So, any final anything final that anybody wants to put in the chat space or say, please unmute yourself. Okay. I had a momentary fear that I didn't record this, but it's not true. I did. So everybody's going to get access to this. Thank you all once again. I wish you well in your journey, and I hope to see you on the mountain.